All right, everybody. So we are live. It's Friday, and we are joined today by our special guest, Doron Keidar. You are an IDF sergeant major from the reserves, and you have just been for a 2-month deployment in Gaza, and you just came back. So we're very glad to have you with us, and good to see you again. We're also friends from before we met each other before, and. It'll be really interesting to talk to you about this. So, good morning, Duran, and how are you?
Good morning, brother. It's a blessing to be here on this platform with our dear friend Leif. And what I can say is that, yeah, I'm pretty tired and worn out from 2+ months of operating, which is on the backdrop of 2 years of on and off deployments. This was our 5th deployment. We deployed 4 times to Gaza, 1 deployment to Lebanon. And I can say that this last deployment, it's that last, pushing your last percentage of what's in the tank, so to speak, both emotionally, physically, job-wise, family-wise. And, also our job is kind of demanding a little bit. It's not the fun work, so to speak. It's the special forces community pushing hard to try to get some very significant goals met during this, trying to reach towards the so-called peace talks and ceasefire. And we've been able to achieve some very important goals. We've been able to retrieve with my team alone. To my knowledge, 7 of the hostages have been returned to us, none of them alive, but they were restored to us outside of the peace talks and negotiations, which is a big win because that means that every hostage was returned from the hands of Hamas without them wanting to return those hostages is a massive, massive win for the IDF, for the state of Israel, and the moral defeat for Hamas. So that's just one aspect that I can share without giving details on how we accomplish that, how we do that. But it is very decisive blow to the enemy. And that's just one small team out of the many of the IDF and many, many goals, many, many achievements throughout this war, which has just been, a blessing to take part of, to have a small cog in the wheel of the overall operations of the IDF.
What was it like when you were there with you and your colleagues when we finally got the at least living hostages back, all of them? What was the feeling like in the atmosphere then?
I could say that after 2 years of a lot of emotional struggle, right? Because emotionally it waxes on you. We're all defenders, contrary to what the media says. We're all defenders. My whole team, most of us are fathers, brothers, family members. We're fighting. We're fighting for a cause. We're not fighting because we take pleasure in war. And when you're operating for such a long time to achieve the goal of, like I said, which actually it's 2 main goals, and it's always been this: it's to return the hostages back to their families. And number 2, to restore safety and security for all of Israel, mostly and most immediate. It's the Gaza envelope communities, the kibbutzim, and so on. And in order to achieve that, it's to dismantle Hamas, to destroy Hamas, a total defeat of Hamas. And I would say it was a mixed feeling. It was a mixed feeling of elation, of like, I can breathe again. I can rejoice again with my family, because every Shabbat has been a struggle. Every Shabbat, every holiday, every Jewish feast, it's been a struggle to sit there with my family, to enjoy the celebratory meals and family time, knowing there are people in this country who are not going to have a full, complete Shabbat, a full, complete holiday season, because their family member is in Gaza. They're starving. I'm enjoying a beautiful meal with my family on the breaks that I get during the deployments. And it's always this feeling of, this sucks. I can't fully enjoy this time with my family. And I would say for the first time in 2 years, when the living hostages were returned, I could say for me, at least, it was a feeling of, I can finally start to participate in the family joys with my family and so on, and kind of unload and not just, be there with this weight on my shoulders. Now, it is, again, still mixed, because the mixed is there are families that they know their family members that are still held in Gaza. They're not alive, according to what they're saying. And I'm saying according to what they're saying, because I honestly am at question, is there any of them that maybe still be alive right now that they're just not saying they're alive, and or the Israeli intelligence isn't aware of the fact that they might be alive? That's a possibility. Who's to say that, right? But let's just say hypothetically they're all not with us. That those families still need to have closure. They still need to have an end of this ongoing grief of not being able to bury their loved ones. But again, just knowing that the ones that I know for a fact have been alive and have been under torture, have been under starvation, that's what was weighing on me. Knowing the psychology of that, knowing the evils of that, looking in the face of the family members at the hostage center. I forget the name of it, but I got to go there at one point during the war and look in the face of the family members who, thank God, they got their child back. But at the time, I saw the grief of the mother. I saw the pain in the mother's eyes. And all it did is drive me to want to go back and keep operating, keep pushing to restore her son back to her, as just one representation of the collective whole that we're still living and suffering in Gaza. So there was that relief. And then there's the disappointment of Hamas isn't destroyed. Hamas isn't completely dismantled. And so as far as I'm concerned, my team is concerned, that's an absolute fail. That's an absolute failure. I won't take anything other than the absolute destruction of Hamas, because until then, the Gazans are not safe ever. They're not having any hope of a future. And the Israelis have no assurance of security and safety that something like this won't be repeated in the future.
Yeah.
When you explain this to people outside of Israel, what is it? Where do we the outside world, where do we most often misunderstand or underappreciate, or what is it we don't get about the reality for you as as a citizen soldier for the IDF and for the Israeli population in general? What are the biggest misunderstandings?
I think one of the biggest misunderstandings is because of the media propaganda war, because the Palestinians are very, very, very successful at winning the hearts and minds of the international community, the world community in large, because the world is ignorant to the Middle East and to the nuances of, the who, the why, and the what. I get demonized. I get labeled as a genocidal, maniac military, baby killers. How many babies have you killed? This is constantly at any interview where I've done podcasts. I've done many throughout the war, which is part of my fight. I don't take a break. I take time away from family on my downtime, as Henrik here has had me on his show, for example, and in order to win the information war at the same time, because I'm fully aware of the fact that because the IDF, especially the Special Forces community that I'm a part of, we are silent professionals, and I tell my peers, I said, we're silent, but not quiet, and that's our problem. Is that because of our silence, so to speak, because we don't share about our missions, our achievements, or just give an insight to civilians into our world, we create a vacuum that the enemy uses to fill with propaganda, with Gazan children are starving and suffering. IDF snipers are killing and targeting children and women. And that's repeatedly said on the airwaves globally. And the number one funders of this information war is Qatar, is Iran, is Turkey, China, Russia, okay? You've never heard this before. Nobody talks about this. But these are the big players who are wanting to demonize and destroy the image of Israel. Why? Well, Russia wants to get the attention off of their war with Ukraine. They want to get out of the frontline news, which was very, very beneficial for them during these 2 years with the Gaza, Lebanon, and the multi-front war that Israel's been fighting. All the news attention's been on us. And so they're going, great. And of course, they're going to invest in that redirection from them. China. Why does China have any interest? Well, at the end of the day, China, Russia, America, these are your world superpowers. They're constantly fighting for number one. They're all fighting for the number one place and position on the world arena. And because Israel is an ally of the United States, we automatically become a target for the other superpowers because we don't have the same diplomatic relationship with them as we do with the United States. And then that, of course, makes us a target. And so that's their incentive. Qatar, money, Iran, they are a revolutionary Islamic revolution from 1979 that has taken over, that have absolute destruction of the world, absolute conquering of the world, and becoming the caliphate, right, leader in, we're going to lead the Islamic world for world domination under Islam. And then, of course, why Turkey? Because Turkey was the last so-called caliphate in the Islamic utopic golden era that they ruled here for nearly 500 years. And so Erdogan, who's a radical, since he's gotten into power, he wants to restore that golden age. And so that's essentially what's happening. And Israel becomes the punching bag for all of these entities. And they have money, they have influence, they have power, and they pump the airwaves with lies. And so when I get up and try to speak or try to share my truth and do the contrary to the silent IDF that never shares anything, or show our face or identities, right? Because now I become a target. I can get arrested if I go to certain countries in Europe, and countries in Africa, countries in, you name it. If I enter into those countries, I will most likely get extradited. And so I'm aware of that. And that's the risk that I've been willing to do. And that's the risk that most of the peers that I have, they enjoy. They protect themselves, and rightfully so, because, do you know the actual identity of SEAL Team 6 guys, DevGru, Delta, or SAS they're operating right now? No. So equally with our counter peers around the world who are in special forces, you're not going to hear names, identities, or where they're operating. So I'm opening myself to basically attack through having this public persona, but it's because it's part of my efforts to fight the war that I'm aware that this is also a battlefield, is the social media.
I really appreciate that you're doing this, Doron. And I was thinking to speaking a little bit about, you were speaking about these myths and these allegations against IDF in the public sphere. So I was thinking maybe we could spend a little bit of time to just debunk a bunch of that stuff. Sure. Like one of the most I don't know, blood libel type of thing is that people are saying that, IDF has snipers and they're just killing little Palestinian children just for fun almost, right? So correct. Could we just speak about that and debunk that? Where is that coming from, and what is the truth about that?
Okay, so here's where it comes from. Where it comes from is, here's what I know for a fact, that the IDF has been very, very careful to minimize any civilian casualties during this war. And let's put a few things on the table. Number one, this war is the most complex war in modern warfare that any military in the world has ever had to deal with. And it's not because Gaza is the most densely populated area in the world. That's absolute BS. Let me just throw that out. That's an absolute lie. We say it and others say it. That's part of the misinformation. Gaza is not the most densely populated. There are areas in Gaza that are very dense in nature, in its urban construct. And it's specifically done that way and built that way, actually, to to engage with the IDF when they know that the IDF will have to come in and make it complicated for the soldiers to navigate those neighborhoods. But there's plenty of open spaces in the very small area of Gaza, because it is a small area, but it's not the most densely populated. That's an absolute lie. And we all repeat that lie. So I want to throw that out there. But what do I mean the most complex? The most complex because within a 42 kilometer by about, at the widest, you're looking at about maybe 10, 12 kilometers wide. And it's typically between 6 to 8 kilometers wide, the Gaza Strip. So in this short space, this short, small area, you had at the beginning of war an estimate of over 600 kilometers of terror tunnel systems. So do the math, and you can understand that is very, very difficult to negotiate in a modern warfare, because when you're going in with a tank or whatever, yeah, you cleared the area, but a terrorist can pop up in any moment from anywhere, literally, and they strategically have the piers or the entry points where they can ambush tanks, convoys, and or soldiers. And they've been doing this throughout the whole war. They're smart enough to know not to engage the IDF face to face, because force on force, they're not equal to us, but they are definitely a force to be reckoned with. They're not losers, they're not to be underestimated. But they know that they're not a match one-on-one confrontation. So instead, they use like a guerrilla underground warfare, plus they use drones, plus they use mortars, plus they use snipers, up to 50 caliber capability from every caliber up to 50 caliber sniper, and booby trapping. Literally almost every other home in Gaza has a booby trap. Okay. Because people say, why is the whole of Gaza just absolute destruction? The IDF in the state of Israel just wanted to destroy and level the whole Gaza Strip. That's not true. It's because so much of the Gaza Strip of the urban areas have been booby trapped, then we are forced to take out the building with a tank round, artillery round, or an airstrike before trying to negotiate the booby traps. Because basically, if you hit it with a high explosive, it can trigger whatever booby traps are in there, if that makes sense. And so we're forced to do that. And they know that. And this is how they win the information war, because they created the problem. We dealt with the solution, and the world gets to see the destruction. So this thing about why do they say children are being sniped and women are being sniped? So like I said, the IDF, with all this complexity, has been trying to operate in literally only negotiate with the terrorists that are armed, which means anyone who is in civilian clothing is not a target. And the terrorists, by the way, throughout the whole war, not one of Hamas terrorists that I've seen or any soldier has seen that I've met in the people that I've been a part of, and I've been the first troops in and some of the last troops out just recently, okay? So ongoing, I've never seen a Hamas terrorist in uniform, ever. They all wear civilian clothing. Why? Because they know our rules of engagement. They use that to their advantage so they can roam above ground and, of course, underground and move munitions, weapons, etc. And like I said, create ambushes for the IDF soldiers, and also all kinds of booby traps, etc. And so what do? We tell the civilian population, we notify them ahead of time, we're coming into this area, so everyone go over here. And so you have a humanitarian corridor. And so what does the Hamas guys do? They snipe the women and the children, and then because they control all media outlets that come out of Gaza, like all information coming out, they record it themselves, and then they send it to Al Jazeera, and Al Jazeera, who is owned by Qatar, mass produces this and shares it with all BBC, CNN, you name it, and basically that's how they create the propaganda misinformation war. They record and they document their crimes, and they label that it's the IDF that did this, the IDF did that, okay? And I'm not saying there hasn't been human collateral, innocent civilian collateral, because that's in every war. It's inevitable. But let's put the numbers on the table. In Iraq and Afghanistan, in the GWAT war, as it's known, the war against terror, in the past 20 plus years that's been fought since 9/11, you have about half out of over 1 million people that were killed in those conflicts, about half were civilian. Half. That's 500,000 people that were killed by your country, Sweden, England, United States, and all of these Western powers that have been fighting against the war against terror, yeah? That's blood on your hands. Now, I'm not accusing you, because I'm not going to play that game of calling you out. I'm just giving you the facts so you can make comparisons. And here's the why, and I'll explain. In contrast, in this past 2 years, 67,000 Palestinians were killed in Gaza. That's one of the rough estimates that we have, or official numbers that we have. But it's a rough estimate. It's not perfect yet, because it's very hard to get the actual numbers. But out of that, 58,000 were Hamas terrorist combatives killed. Do the math. That's over 80% combative to civilian. Now, I'll take it even further. Out of those civilians, casualties, and this is official numbers, by the way. This is not the IDF number. It's not the State of Israel. It's the official numbers that are out there. I would say out of those civilians, you have combatant, I forget the term for it, but it's basically they assist the Hamas terrorists. So they're not necessarily innocent completely. So they were probably in the area of warfare where we were targeting the terrorists. Like we said, here's the humanitarian area. You go here. We're going for the terrorists. If you go and you're helping the terrorists as a civilian, you're going to go down. That's war. You know, you shouldn't be in a war zone. Okay. So that's our numbers. So our numbers are miraculously low, considering that this is the most complex warfare in modern times that there's ever been fought. I'm saying God has been doing a very good job helping us to help the Gazans not get mass murdered through this war. Because in every war, civilians get killed. It's terrible. It's part of warfare. That's why nobody ever should go to war. No country. So we don't enjoy it. We don't take pleasure in it. We're doing our best. But I'm saying with our best efforts, it's miraculous. It's unprecedented. And I just chalk it up to God has helped us to do a very ethical, not for our sake, but really for the Gazans' sake, having mercy for them and having compassion for them, being under the rule of Hamas that has put them in this ugly situation of using them as human shields and propagating all of Gaza to basically either support terrorism or to hate Israel. And it creates basically a whole generation of psychopaths. Okay. And it's I'm not saying this because I'm hating the Gazans. It's just the fact that the way they've grown up is with just pumping since 2005 when Israel pulled out. Then Hamas has had full reign to pump propaganda in schools, in mosques, and in every aspect of life. And anyone who disagrees, and there are people who do, but anyone who does, they brutally murder and torture these people to make a lesson. And that's, again, why I really wanted to destroy Hamas personally, because they need to be freed from this. It is so wrong. And that's something the world's not talking about. That's something that these bleeding hearts are saying from the river to the sea. Why aren't you fighting to liberate Gazans from Hamas? Instead, you're fighting me, who's trying to become the solution to dismantle them.
Another issue, I guess, is that there are, like, out of the, it was 68,000 you said, and roughly, from that you have such and such many terrorists, but at the same time, it's difficult to say that the rest is civilians, because civilian, I've stopped using actually the term civilian. I've tried to I'm starting to use the term innocent instead, because civilian can be so many things. Because we saw on October 7th a bunch of people who you would label like civilian were enjoying the October 7th. They were taking part in it, and when they were
Correct.
bringing out the hostages, they were running after the trucks and hitting them and spitting on them. So how are you able to distinguish between true, like, innocent civilians and the people who are just hiding behind kind of a civilian type of brand, and then actually taking part in atrocities and terror?
Well, that's what I was trying to explain. That to be honest, there isn't really true civilians, true innocence in Gaza. Okay, not because in a way they were innocent when they were born, right? I mean, they were innocent. They didn't know the difference between good and bad, what have you. But because of the way they have been propagated for, was it 20 years now, and their lives are under the gun, growing up under the gun, under fear of death or torture. If you don't agree with Hamas radical ideology, if you don't agree with what you're being taught in school, with which Israel are demons, Israel are bad, Israel is this, and it's all gonna be ours. This is all they know. This is literally all they know. So to me, how do I differentiate? I would say the differentiation that the IDF makes is those who are not in armed conflict against the soldiers. And that's what's so radical, like I said, is that 58,000 armed radical terrorists were the ones that we were able to eliminate out of the I think it's about 67,000 rough estimate of the current numbers that we have. That's outstanding. And as I pointed out, that even the so-called civilian casualties, those were the ones that we couldn't say without a shadow of a doubt they were armed combatants. I'm saying, who's to say they were not supporting by either transporting weapons to the terrorists, and why were they in the war zone where the IDF was operating to begin with? Because if they were not there, they wouldn't be targeted, right? They wouldn't fall under an airstrike or an attack on the armed terrorists that are there. That's why we're there. We're not going to target civilians just roaming freely. I'll give you an example. Here's something that I experienced when I was in Gaza in our operations. We went into, I'm not going to say what area because I want to protect this family that we encountered, but we were in an area in Gaza, the area that was cleared out from civilians, and that the IDF takes positions, defensive positions in that area, in the homes that are there, in the facilities that are there in this battle space. And so we came in with our team, and we were discussing some mission operation, what have you, with the local military force that is occupying this space. And we saw, when I walked into the compound where the soldiers were, they had guard positions, what have you, their gear and everything in that place where they're living. And I remember cutting the corner, I see a soldier guarding an empty room. And I was like, this is weird. Like, what is he doing guarding this empty room? And because I was coming from the sunny area and it was dark behind him in that room, but I knew there weren't soldiers in there because you can just see, there's no gear, there's no soldiers, there's no movement of life. But as I kind of walked in and looked around him to see, like, what are you standing here guarding? This is kind of silly. Like, what are you guarding? Like the generator, or like what? And I see a family of 2 parents and 5 children, Gazans. And I'm what in the world? And I asked the guy, I said, not to embarrass the family and discuss them in front of themselves. I asked one of the guys, I said, what is this all about? Oh yeah, this family, they said that they were being targeted by Hamas. The father claims to have been targeted by Hamas. And if he went to the humanitarian area, that, like I said, there's the corridor that moves the population from place to place as the war unfolded, he decided to go to the IDF instead, because he said that if he went there, Hamas would search for him in those camps and try to kill him. And I said, well, why? They said, well, we're not really sure. That's what he claims. I said, so he rather come to us and in danger getting killed by the soldiers, thinking that he's a terrorist approaching military positions? That's outrageous. That's insane. Nobody talks about something like this. Now, mind you, they had to put an extra guard post, which out of the manpower, that means less sleep time, less rest time for the soldiers. Okay. Any extra post of where you have postings for security is terrible for the troops that are deployed. And their food rations had to be shared with this family. And so we were having compassion for these guys because we come in and out with our unit. We're a special mobility unit, so we don't necessarily stay deployed in the battle zone. We come in and out all the time and engage with many troops constantly. We're not deployed with one troop per se. So we were like, hey, we have a bunch of our goodies that we brought, for the day. You can have that, because we felt bad for these guys. That's a reality. That's a reality. They rather guard this family, because guess what? The general that was in charge of these soldiers could have said, tell that family to take a hike. We don't care. You're not our problem. The general instead said, you know what? You're our problem. I'm going to have these soldiers do guard duty over you. Because why guard duty? Because imagine, maybe they are terrorists. Maybe they are a threat. I don't know. You're not going to let them roam around where the soldiers are, right? And besides, you're not going to let them roam around so that other soldiers who approach the facility, the area, don't see this man who is in a military area and think, oh, he's a terrorist, shoot and kill this guy before he tries to harm one of the soldiers here. He's probably trying to attack this outpost. You understand? This is the realities that we're up against. Nobody's going to talk about that.
Another prominent allegation against the IDF is that ambulance case where they say that IDF was shooting at the ambulances. Yeah. Could we go into that and try to debunk that one too?
Well, there's actually nothing to debunk. The bottom line is that ambulance incident, that particular incident that got widespread attention and whatnot, that actually was a misidentification of combatants. The soldiers did eliminate all those people, and it was a mistake, plain and simple. And what happened was that the soldiers that gave testimony, they tried to protect themselves and guard themselves from making that mistake. And because of that, then of course it became a stink that, oh, the IDF is trying to hide something. No, it was just the soldiers were trying to basically cover their butts for making a mistake instead of owning up to, we failed. This was a misidentification. We should not have shot at that vehicle, plain and simple. And there you have it. Everybody says that we're just defending ourselves. We're just not going to take ownership for anything. I'm telling you, I'm owning up, even though the soldiers that were there did not. I don't know if at the end they did or not, but I can guarantee you that they are not going to be operating anymore. They're not going to be back in the field. They are going to be, because I don't know the final verdict of what the IDF legal system did, but I guarantee you they're not going to be operating ever again.
There's also a huge gap between actually misidentifying and making a grave mistake and saying that IDF did that on purpose, purposefully targeting ambulances to just kill civilians, right? Correct.
It was a misidentification of a threat, and I'll tell you why. Because the problem is, listen, I'll give you an example. We almost, my team almost killed an innocent man. Okay. We almost killed an innocent man because, again, there was a Palestinian who was in the vicinity of our compound. And of course, like I said, you're not supposed to have civilians coming, like while you're approaching our compound, right? And basically because there was a break and miss of information on the radio, we got in a defensive position. I was one of the guys who was one of the guns on the guy in the direction where he's coming. So had he popped up over that berm, he would have probably been dead by myself or any of the guys that were in that shooting position. That we got intel and a warning from those that were at the outpost. There's someone approaching our compound. In the end, they had a permission. There was a specific reason why this individual was there. It just didn't trickle down to the soldiers. And this man almost paid for it with his life. Again, warfare is not clean. Warfare gets chaotic. And it's enough that the information doesn't pass down because radio communications, because of whatever and whatnot, some innocent people will get killed. But again, if you're a civilian and you're in a war zone, the best way to survive is to be in the civilian population areas that were designated for you. Anytime you leave that area, you risk death. That's a fact. That's a reality. And so every one of the Gazans who have died in this war, civilians, it's because they left those areas. We didn't target those civilian areas in our warfighting. And that's the difference. Another time, by the way, that same outpost, there was a young kid who came to the outpost, a young Palestinian kid. And again, because they identified him as a young kid, then the soldiers treated him as a less threat. But again, we're like, what is he doing coming to us? So we had to be on high alert, and the soldiers went, engaged with the kid. Hey kid, what are you doing here? You need to go over there. I'm not going to say which area, because again, I don't want the enemy to know what we do and don't know, because I'm assuming he was sent by the enemy to test our resolve, to test our reactions. And I don't want to give them information that will help them with essentially what they're trying to do. They're probing. So I interpret that as it's a very potential probing of the enemy. Because again, why did this kid approach our compound? It's a military compound. There's no question about it. He had nothing to find there. And it was hundreds of kilometers away from any civilian area. So in other words, he had to go way out of his way to come to us.
And isn't it true also that when we read here in newspapers in the Western media, especially in Norway, when we see headlines such as IDF kills children, then the actual truth is like such a situation such as a 16, 17-year-old radicalized youth is or persuaded or threatened by Hamas to bring knives or guns and try to attack IDF soldiers, and then IDF soldiers in desperation and self-defense shoots and kills that person. And then you get headlines such as IDF kills kids because technically he's under 18. And that doesn't really reflect the reality at all with such headlines.
Exactly. And again, this is where the West is completely ignorant to the way of life of a radical Islamic terrorist group. They're radical Islamists. They know your worldview. They know how you think. They know that to you, anyone under 18 is a poor, innocent child. Let's be real. Let's be real. Anyone from 13 and up is more or less a young adult. But just because of our modern law in most of Western civilization that does not label them as a young adult, then the legal system is, in my opinion, and in the West, is actually skewed. It's actually skewed. Any kid who is over 13 has the moral, not wisdom, okay? Because obviously we know that it takes many years till your brain fully develops and whatnot. But I would say at bare minimum, they know the difference between right and wrong. At bare minimum. So they're not fully innocent youths. Yeah? So that's first of all. Am I saying that I'm happy to take the life of a young child over 13? No. What I am saying is quit looking at the Middle East and at the enemy, which is the Islamic radicals in the Middle East, in the same view that you view your own society, because we do not share the same realities at all. And that's something that's very difficult for me as an Israeli to internalize, because I don't have that worldview. I have a very similar worldview as most Westerners, that yes, up until 18 and you become considered an adult, we should be protecting those children. We should help them grow. We should help them mature. We should help them to make right decisions so that when they become a young adult, that they can go off and they can make a life for themselves and they can be successful. That's what I invest in my child. They do not. They invest, like I said, from zero to whatever age, in radicalizing and in using these young children and young youth. It's because, trust me, they also use much younger children to carry out terrorist attacks, but they use young children to young youths up to adulthood to carry out terrorist attacks, knowing, like you said, that the Western media is going to label them as a child that the IDF killed. And it's unfortunate and it's terrible. And let me tell you, there's no soldier that I know that wants that on his conscience, that I had to kill this young boy, this young girl, or what have you. But yes, if they pose a threat, if they're carrying an RPG, if they're whatever. And let me give you an example that maybe can help your audience. Watch some war movies that have done a very good job to help portray to you what the war fighters have had to face with these radical ideologies. So you have American Sniper, and you have the opening scene with the sniper up on the roof who is looking at a kid, and the guy almost loses it because he almost had to shoot this kid in that scene. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, again, that's Hollywood, but it portrays what I'm up against. It portrays what evil I'm up against. Because then later on, it also unveils to you the terrorists and how they get full control of the masses. They take a young child, and the guy takes a drill to the child's head in front of his parents, saying, "Oh, you wanted to collaborate with the U.S. forces? You're going to pay a price. This is what we're going to do to your child." Mm-hmm. And so when you watch that as a Westerner, let me point out another thing. That is actually a censored version of the evil I'm up against. That's not even the serious evils of what these guys actually do to these children. Because if we actually made a film that portrayed it reality, you would throw up in the audience. Nobody would sit through that film. Nobody. Because the reality is, it's way worse than you can even imagine. And so think about that and realize that's what I'm up against. And to demonize me and to make me that guy with the drill, you're the one that's sick in the head. You're the one that's been propagated, and you've fallen for the lies that I'm the bad guy, that the Navy, that the Marine that went down range to Afghanistan, Iraq, he's the bad guy. No, they're the war fighters fighting for you, fighting for your freedoms, fighting for our society. And that's the truth.
One other thing that we alluded to earlier, which I think is important for people to realize, which is that you're reservists. Many of the units that have been inside Gaza doing the war fighting, they're in fact reserve soldiers. So you guys are all citizen soldiers.
Correct.
You're not sort of a professional military like we have in the United States, or for that matter, like the Republican Guard in Iran. So you go home afterwards and talk about your experiences. And I remember during the first Intifada, one of the big issues was that the reservists were watching the things that were unfolding in the West Bank, and they came home and they were concerned about the political situation there. So it's not easy, I would imagine, but please confirm, to do horrible things for military units in the IDF, to do horrible things, and those things not to get out when they come home and they speak with their friends and their family. So if you could talk to that, but also about a little bit about the tone and how you guys work together in these units, because people probably have strange ideas about how you work in the atmosphere and so forth.
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, our sad reality is a few different things. Okay. First of all, anyone who has ever had to fight a war for you, if it be Norway, if it be Sweden, Denmark, England, United States, etc. This is the world of the war fighters. And those war fighters are paid to do it. It's their job. It's their livelihood. They're professionals. We're amateurs. We're an amateur army. We're an army that does not, we get a subsidy when in reserve duty, but when you're enlisted, you get even a smaller subsidy. I'm not going to give exact numbers because it's not good for us to share too many details of how we operate, but I'm sure it's on open source somewhere. But bottom line is, you get a small stipend for like expenses like, going out, helping with your rent a little bit, definitely doesn't pay the rent and definitely doesn't pay your bills. Let's put it like that.
Right.
But then when you become a reservist, then the military has to give you a certain percentage that's close to your salary. If you're a doctor or a lawyer or somebody that basically makes a really significant amount of money, you're not going to get anywhere close to your normal salary. So we're all taking pay cuts when on reserve duty, right? Because like you pointed out, we have to leave our jobs and our family as a father, as a business owner, or employee, and you go, and now you're, for a few months, you're now in the military back again, and you have to make that switch from civilian life to military life, and then also you have those concerns that are now on your head as at least for a father. I can't speak for the women that serve in the military, but I can say for me and the men that I serve with, there's that strain of being that provider, right, for your family, and you're not cutting the mustard for that time period. Mm-hmm. And so you're taking a financial hit, you're taking an emotional hit, you're not with your kids, you're not helping your wife with taking the kids to the what do you call it? If like in my case, take them to jiu-jitsu, help them with their school, help them with a hike and a time with your children, and so on and so on and so forth, right? Bedtime, dinner, laundry, etc. It all falls on my wife instantly. There is no tapping out. There is no, hey, I'm sick, can you switch me out? And then equally for me, that's over there. There is no someone to take that burden off of me and say, you know what, I got you, Doron, just focus on the mission. I'm constantly worried, okay, as a man, like, where am I going to make up for next month? And I look at my account and I'm like, this is not looking good. This sucks. Right. There's no one to take that weight from me. There's no one to take that responsibility from me, and you just deal with it. And so the point being is, for those who might think that we benefit from these wars, the complete opposite is the truth. We emotionally, physically, and financially, we lose on all accounts. The only win, of course, is that we get safety and security for the people that we defend. And that's the other thing that's different with us. You go to the other side of the world to fight your wars mostly. My war is here in my backyard. My war is right here with my neighbors, and that's also emotionally very taxing. And there's no break. I can never take a break. American soldiers talk about, they come home and, they want to just cut the grass and they just want to sit at the beach and drink a Muay Thai, smoke a cigar or whatever, sit there at the campfire, and just forget it all. I never get to do that. Every day that I go out into shopping or anywhere public, there's the constant threat of a terrorist attack. There's the constant reality that I could be called up immediately to come back to the mission and go fight another war, another invasion, another what have you. I could come under Iranian missile attack or Houthis or what have you. There's no break. There's no getting away from the war. Both my family and myself, we're constantly on the front lines. There is no, I can just check out, and so that's a very hard dynamic. That's a very difficult dynamic. But what I will say, in addition to that, I'll read you a quote, because I think this is something that no matter where you're at in the world, this is something that we all can relate to as warriors and defenders. And for those that want to somehow demonize me and make me worse than whatever, I can tell you that if I meet with a soldier from the United States or from Europe, we can all agree to this statement. And this statement is actually written from a good friend of mine who's a Marine recon sniper, old school guy. So many years of experience. And this was his statement that he wrote and shared with me. It says this: our level of passion to protect the ones we love must exceed their hatred and effort to kill us. If not, we're destined to fail. This is what motivates me. This is what motivates every defender, every soldier that's ever fought in any war to defend their country and what we love most. This is what we're doing all of this for. I'm doing it for my kids. I'm doing it for my wife. I'm doing it for my larger family in Israel, because we're all a family. So even in Israel, this is something you don't have in Europe. Definitely not in Norway. Definitely not in Sweden. If you get married, it blows my mind. It's like, oh no, I don't need to have family reunions with my mom and dad and cousins and whatever. I'm like, what? No, I have my family. Like, what do you mean you have your family? Yeah, I got married and I left my home and, I have my life. I'm like, what? Like, for us, you get married, that's an extension of your family, and you have family gatherings and barbecues and Shabbats and celebration. But it's also an extended family, right? So it's not just the core family, so to speak, by blood, but it's my neighbors, it's my coworkers. It's the fact that everyone in Israel is, in a way, a big family. It's an extension of, and that's part of our identity as Jews, which is very unique as well. As much as the world wants to hate on that and say, oh, they think they're so special and unique. And, Ben Shapiro says that, if America fails him, then he has his backup to go to Israel. Well, and they can't be completely loyal to their country, right? Like, they can't be completely loyal to Norway. They can't be completely Norway to America. No, it's that the Jewish people are unique in that sense, that we all see each other. If we're black, if we're Asian, if we're white, we're all Jews. And therefore, we are all family. We're all of the family of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, extension of that which God promised to us as a nation. And so that is very unique to Israel. And what's so beautiful as well is because of that culture that we have as Jews, the Arab Israelis, Christian, Muslim, Druze, Bedouins, all the other minorities that live here, they actually kind of, it rubs off on them as well. And that's why you have this odd, to me, it's kind of weird, is you have a Bedouin Muslim who's a Zionist. You have a Druze who's a Zionist, and they see themselves as part of the Commonwealth of Israel. And they'll sing this national anthem, which says Nefesh Yehudi, like, how does a Bedouin Muslim say, as they're reciting the national anthem, Nefesh is like spirit, or I think is a good way to put it, is the spirit, the Jewish spirit. How do your lips say this and can relate to this? It's, to me, it's odd, but it's the beauty of what Israel is. Israel, yes, is a nation people, and we're a big family, and we're all affected by each other. But we also bring in those that live amongst us, and we embrace them into our family as well. We don't reject them. We don't treat you different. We don't act, is there racism in Israel? Yes. Are there people that hate each other? Yes. But the collective whole, no. The collective whole, we receive everyone. And it's very unique. And it's something that I've never seen anywhere in the world. And I've been around the world, trust me, to many places, and also received testimonies of people from around the world who have seen Israel, and they repeat what I just told you when they see it with their own eyes.
Isn't it true that also in the IDF you have people that are Druze, that are Muslim, that are Christians, that are Jewish? And I think that is so important to mention, because Israel all the time gets, especially in Norway, this apartheid kind of stamp that you're trying to place on Israel.
Yeah.
And I can't make that work, that allegation. Could you speak a little bit about IDF? What kind of different religions and ethnicities and everything that you have?
So we have basically every part of Israeli society. Like you pointed out, we have Druze, we have Bedouins, we have different types of Muslims, Christian Arabs, Cherkessian. They're a small minority Muslim group. You have this is a fun one. You have the Black Hebrews. There's a small group in Beersheba. They're called, the Black Hebrews, and they're actually anti-Israel. They see themselves as the real Israelites, and it's a very interesting cult, basically. But within, like I said, because the society is so open, and we kind of we kind of influence the other minorities through the Jewish culture, really is what it is, then and I'll have him on my podcast. Actually, he'll be one of my interviewees. He's a fellow colleague of mine, big, tall, black kid, that is un-Israeli, un-Jewish as you can imagine. Yet because he grew up here within the Black Hebrew community and left them and went against their anti-Israel, not anti, but they don't see themselves as loyal to the state of Israel as regular citizens, if that makes sense. And yet he left that community to serve in the IDF. And because he served in the IDF and because he was ostracized from his community, he actually, when off base, where is he going to sleep? Where is he going to stay? He's not going back to his community or to his family that has kind of rejected him for making this radical divorce of worldview by serving in the IDF. He had to live with an Israeli family that took him in. And so he got to experience that Israeli Jewish culture from that spin. I think they were Moroccan. So so he got that Moroccan Israeli influence, right? As a black, basically they're blacks from America. They're not from Africa, actually. Right. They're American Africans, if you like, Africans that through the slave trade and years later, because they're very different than regular Africans. And I know people don't really understand that. And I'm not trying to discriminate, if you like, but through my very many years of experience in Africa, I do a lot of work in Africa. I learned that on my own self. I just assumed that everyone in Africa were like American black people that I knew. And then when I got to Africa, I go, oh, wow. So they have different ethnicities here. It's not just all black people with the same features or the same ethnic, makeup. They're sub black people with many different ethnicities. And it was something that was very surprising to me, So they're that American black people minority in Israel, and some of them have joined the IDF. Some of them have embraced Israeli society fully and are not part of that worldview that the small. And why I'm emphasizing these people is just that because it is such a nuance. It's such a talked about, because we talk about the Ethiopian Jews. Yeah, but they're Jews,
Right.
But these are these ethnicities that live here and that Israel has welcomed and allowed to come in here. And I honestly don't understand how we allowed this kind of cult type group that is basically anti the Jewish people to come here and to set up camp here and have a whole community in the southern part of Israel. But that's Israel, We're not an apartheid country. Talk about Africa. One of the good friends of mine that I've known for many years, and I'll be actually doing some very fun diplomacy there with the country that he's in. He reached out to me and said, brother, I just want you to know that as someone who's lived in Europe, someone who's lived in New York, me visiting Israel, I've seen that Israel is the most diverse, multicultural country I've ever been to in my life. And I'm like, wow. And that's coming from a black guy from Africa who's been living in Europe and in New York. And it couldn't be truer what he said,
Where can people find your podcast, Doron?
What's
It's just
it's simple. It's just my name,
answer that question first, and I'll get.
Yeah, doronkeidar.com
Okay.
has all of my social media stuff. It has our film that we produced, the I Am Israel, and it has links to either podcast interviews that I've done and or my own podcast as well.
Yeah, good. Go ahead, Life. You had a question.
Yeah, so I have a follow-up point, if I may, and please comment, which is I've been studying a little bit of history, and Jewish history is full of catastrophes. Everything from discrimination to pogroms to riots to expulsions and genocide. And and the thing is that the impulse in the Jewish community up until the State of Israel was founded was to keep a very low profile, because there was no way they could actually protect themselves except by, basically hiding or fleeing. But I think that what's happening now in this crisis is that the Jewish community is starting to pick up, starting to show opposition at the Jewish community in the diaspora. It's basically pushing back on these things. And I think that I don't think we should underestimate the significance of knowing that we have a state in Israel where we have the capability and the willingness to actually fight back physically if we have to. And so I think that the effects of Israel protecting itself are profound also in the diaspora, in the Galut.
100%. In fact, and this is really the miracle of Israel, is that for over 2,000 years, since the days of the Maccabees, actually, we have not had a Jewish defense force of any kind. Nothing to defend Jews from persecution, from expulsion, from pogroms in Europe, etc., and all the evils that we've experienced in the 2,000 years of exile and whatnot. And thanks to a Christian Zionist named Ord Wingate. He was a British officer that came to British Mandate of Palestine in order to create a task force to fight against the Arab marauders that were making hell for the British forces that were here after they had defeated the Turks. And so what Ord Wingate did is, as a Christian Zionist who was unique, he wasn't any mainstream Christian denomination. He was actually a very small minority. I forget the exact name, but it was a very small denomination that he himself was a part of. But he had a very unique biblical view, contrary to most of his British peers. And that was that the Jewish people are going to be restored, that God's going to restore them to their land, and that therefore they're going to have to create a state. And when that state is going to be created, and they're going to have leadership that rules and democracy and all this, but that democracy have to be protected by a military. And so that was his vision, and that was his gift to the state of Israel, is he gifted us the boldness and the courage to defend ourselves, because no Jew in the diaspora was willing to do that. The only one that had anything similar in vision was Theodore. Joseph Trumpeldor. Excuse me. So Joseph Trumpeldor was a military officer in one of the most elite fighting units for Russia, which was very, very, very rare, because Jews never had any high positions in the Russian military. So he was, of course, discriminated against for being Jewish and whatnot, but because he kept proving himself as a worthy servant to Russia, they kept promoting him and they kept sending him to better units and so on and so forth. So he ended up becoming a very well-trained Russian officer. He then got wounded in one of the wars for Russia, lost his arm in battle. I think it was his right arm. And then he decided that he was done with his military career. And so he's going to come to help train the Jews who were building kibbutzim, and they were planting vineyards and whatnot, that he's going to show them how to defend those things, because the Arab marauders were doing the same to these Jewish pioneers. And so that was his vision. And that was what was the birth of the Hashomer movement, which basically the first time ever Jews were saying, we're not just visionaries. We're going to tap into that Maccabee history and spirit, that we're also going to be warriors like King David. And we're going to fight, and we're going to defend ourselves. We're not just going to be philosophers. We're not just going to be Torah scholars, but we can tap into that past of we're also a warrior nation. And so he helped contribute to that, which he ended up dying in doing so. And that's why the name of the town, which is where I grew up, is called Kiryat Shmona in the north. because they defended Tel Hai against the Arab marauders, and one of the attacks that they did against them, and it was actually a sneak attack that they did. They lied to them. They put up the flag because they were like, holy crap, these Jews are able to defend themselves. So the Arabs said, hey, they put up a flag and said, we give up, we give up. And so they let the Arab leaders come into the compound that was defended, and underneath their Arab robes, they had weapons. And when they met with the leadership, one of them being Joseph Troubadour, who is a part of the 9 people that ended up being killed under that surprise attack, because they then pulled out the weapons and started shooting and killing all the leadership there, and trying to basically sneak attack and defeat the Jews that were defending Tel Hai. So on the exception of him, the only one that had the capacity to really build and create a Jewish defense force was Orde Wingate, which was an exceptional British general. And he did just that. And in fact, had he not died during the war in Burma, he would have been the first chief of staff of the IDF as a non-Jew, and probably the only chief of staff of the state of Israel who would have been a non-Jew. And we called him Hayadid, the friend. So if it wasn't for Orde Wingate, and if it wasn't for these Christian Zionists, I'm telling you right now, we wouldn't have a state, because Orde Wingate was the one that contributed to the defense military to defend Jews for the first time, like I said, since the Maccabees. At the same time, you had Christian Zionists from around the world who petitioned for the state of Israel. So for the statehood and for the political stand and right of the Jewish people to return to their homeland, that was also contributed from the Christian Zionists, because we didn't have the balls to do that as Jews. And that is why for many years I've been working and collaborating with Christians, and specifically Christian Zionists, to continue the defense of this state of Israel and the claim that we have to the land, not just to what we've been given through all these wars, but also to Judea, Samaria, and also to the Temple Mount, and to have full Jewish rights to all of the land of Israel, not just to what the United Nations thinks is belonging to us or what Trump thinks belongs to us, but to what is biblically and historically our right to this land. And I believe that there's no other better collaborators and supporters than the Christian Zionists globally, who share that value with us and that worldview.
And Doron, going forward, we also want to speak about in the future or now with these new initiatives from Trump and the Board of Peace, and what is going to happen in Gaza, who's going to control it, and also who is actually going to disarm Hamas. What are your thoughts about that going forward?
My thoughts are equally to my thoughts about it back in 2003. I've not changed an iota on my opinion on this. And that is going back to what I just said about Christian Zionism, which parallels the Jewish Zionist movement. Today, Zionism is a dirty word, thanks to the misinformation and the propaganda war that has been fighting against this union between the West and Israel. Zionism is simple. Zionism is the Jewish people's right to return to their homeland, which is Israel. So it's the Jewish self-determination. That's what it is. It's that simple. So for anyone to say that they're anti-Zionist, that means that they're anti the Jews' right to statehood. And that's first of all. Historically and biblically, archaeologically, however you want to spin it and look at it, this movement is justified on all accounts. Now, the problem is that you have political agendas and aspirations that try to bring peace in the Middle East, because we have constant wars with the Arabs. Actually, it's not the Palestinians. That's false. In fact, here, I'll give you a book that I recommend. If you want to better understand the conflict, you should read, and this is on my website that I shared with you guys. It's The Truth About Palestine, that Lars Anderson, who's a Swede, by the way, he's written this book. for a Christian audience. And he lays out the Palestinian myth and lie. There isn't such a thing as Palestinians. There isn't such a thing as a people group. There isn't such a thing as a state of Palestine. It's always been Israel. It's always been the Jewish people's homeland. There have been different empires that have come and conquered, and it's exchanged hand throughout history. But the only ones who have ever made a state or a nation out of this area, a capital, and anyone to rule it, were the Jews. Every other empire that came through here actually did not make anything significant of Jerusalem and or of all the landmass of what we know as today as modern Israel. The only ones to do that are the Jewish people. And I would say that what people need to understand is that we cannot afford to give up land for peace, and definitely not to a fictitious people that do not exist. The Arabs that live here are Jordanian, they are Egyptian, they are Lebanese, they are Syrian, they are Arabian. They come from the Pan-Arabic Middle East. So this war is not a war of Israelis against a minority Palestinians that we've conquered their land. This war is between the Jewish right to their homeland against the Arab unacceptance of the Jews being restored to their homeland, period. So it is not a war of who gets the right to this land. It's the unacceptance, the unwillingness for Jews to live in their homeland. So that's the real apartheid that comes from our Arab neighbors, and they use this Palestinian myth to perpetuate it, to perpetuate the war, and to deflect their anti-Semitic unwillingness to allow us to self-determination. Plain and simple. And nobody talks about it in these clear terms because we all bullshit the terms by using the Palestinian people and the Jewish people versus the Palestinian people. That's a lie. Quit using their narrative. We failed in the narrative war by using their term. That Yasser Arafat was the father of doing so. So when you read this book, you can get some clear historic facts as to the birth of this fictitious myth of the Palestinians, which Yasser Arafat is the father of, which the KGB/FSB created. They used a propaganda war to win legitimacy, to delegitimize the Israeli right to this land. So all that to say, by giving up Gaza, by giving up Judea, Samaria, by giving up the right to Jerusalem, we are giving up our right, our rightful right to the whole land of Israel. And I am one who does not agree at all in making any compromise of giving up any of these lands for peace. On the contrary, I believe it all belongs to the state of Israel. It all belongs to the Jewish right of our self-determination in this historic land. And any Arabs who want to live in that state are welcomed. And they always have been, as we discussed earlier. They've always have been. They've always been a part of our society. We've never discriminated against any minorities in this country. Quite the contrary. They have full Israeli rights. They are full citizens of the state of Israel if they show their willingness to embrace the statehood. If they reject and if they show disdain, well, then there are laws that protect against those threats against the state of Israel. And they're not going to be completely welcomed. And it's that simple. It's not discrimination. It's quite the contrary. It's that we're not fighting for our full right. And we play these political wars and we divide the land. And according to Joel chapter 3, that to me comes with a curse, which I don't want anything a part of. That's my worldview.
Also, what I understand is that there are two different narratives going on, and I'm currently reading the new book Hostage by Elie Sharabi, who was a hostage down in the terror tunnels of Hamas, and he actually got to speak quite a bit with the terrorists themselves, with quite frank conversations, and from that I derive a lot of information. And And a lot of it is that they prepare Hamas and Qatar and all these different supporters of terror has prepared this PR package for the West to make it more edible, more palatable for the West, to make the narrative about, this is about Hamas putting themselves on the map again. This is about the Palestinian uprising against the occupation.
The
October
Nakba.
7th, October 7th was just about this oppressed people fighting back, and these are prepared narratives, while in reality, and as the terrorists themselves opened up and told Ali Sharabi down in the terror tunnels, no, this is all jihad. This is all Islamic warfare. We want to destroy Israel, destroy every Jew, throw every Jew in the sea, from the river to the sea. We want everything. We don't want a single Jew. We don't want anything of Israel here. This is this is what it's about. But the West, that isn't palatable to the West. We can't say that openly, obviously. So we have to wrap it in language that the West understands and the West could support. So that's why we have this external narrative and we have this internal narrative.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I would say though, if you listen to what Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, what they say, they don't have two narratives. They're very clear. They don't accept the state of Israel as, as a Jewish state. They don't even really accept Jewish presence, never mind sovereignty, on any part of what they hope to turn into the problem is on our side, or that we refuse to take them at their word, even though they've been consistent the whole time. They're not pretending. We're pretending.
Yeah.
Exactly. And see, every home that I entered in Gaza, where I saw books or posters about in Arabic, here I found one. It's always the whole land of Israel. Yeah. See, this is one of their books. I'm sorry, trying to get that with my camera. Okay.
Yeah.
See the key
and the flag. Yeah.
And the flag. It's all ours. This is their worldview. This is a school book. This is how they're taught. This is how they're like I said, propagated in their minds. The so-called Palestinian mindset is like I said, it's the pan-Arabic unwillingness to accept that Jews who were oppressed by Islam and that were never supposed to ever get to bring their heads up high again ever, that they should ever have any right to breathe and go, we have independence. No, we don't accept that. So the narrative of apartheid, the narrative of unwillingness to accept the other, is literally falls flat on the pan-Arabic world, plain and simple. And these people that we call Palestinians, these Arabs that we call Palestinians, who live in our midst, they are the enemy within the gates. Okay, they are literally the enemy within our gates. They will never accept a Jewish state. They will never accept anything less than all or nothing, and that's their worldview. And my view is equally the same. It is all a Jewish state, because that is the true right to who's indigenous to this land. And yet I open my hands and say, I will welcome you as the minority who wants to live here in peace and participate. No problem. But if you're going to resist me and you're going to try to propagate against me and you're try to destroy me because you are insane and you're not willing to accept the 22 Arab Muslim states, which are massive, you have full options for self-determination. Because real self-determination is for the Jordanian Arabs to go back to Jordan, for the Egyptian Arabs to go back to Jordan. And you say, well, Doron, you're such a bigot, you're such a racist. Read this book, and you will see how they themselves said, we are Egyptians. How dare you not fight for us, as they're pleading for Egypt to fight against Israel. So when they want to be, they're Egyptians. When they want to be, they say, we're Arabian. And they use their names and they use their identity, their ethnic identity, to claim legitimacy for the Arab world to fight for them. But when they want to play, like you said, this double game, there's the internal message and the external message that they tell the world. And the world is naive, and the world buys their lie, and they swallow it hook, line, and sinker. And you know what? They're using that propaganda to try to destroy and take away my right to this land. They're going to do the same in Europe. And not that they're going to, they're doing it now. They're doing it now. How many of these asylum seekers have you seen come in and say, this is not your country, it's mine? What?
Yes. Yes.
What? What do you mean? You're an asylum. We gave you asylum. No, F you. It's mine. It is mine, and I'm taking it.
Yeah.
And Europeans are shocked. It's like, how dare they say that? What did you think? You think they would accept you because you welcomed them and opened your doors to them? You were wrong. Just like we were wrong to assume that they would accept our hand for peace. So I don't believe in that. I believe that we need to fight for the state of Israel and for our self-determination, and show the Arab world we are willing to fight, and we are willing to put all guns out if we have to. And if you accept us, then you're going to see our peaceful, quiet, and we're not going to bug you. But if you try to destroy us, we will fight you and we will destroy you if we have to. And that needs to be our stance. And it has to be the stance in Europe. It has to be a stance in America. You need to stop playing games with these people, because like you also pointed out there, Eric, very beautifully, Henrik, is that they're playing a silent jihad. It's the silent jihad. They're quietly taking over through narratives. And like you said, it's the internal narrative that they tell themselves and what they tell you to deceive you and to destroy you. And you need to be aware of that. I'm not saying every Muslim is like this. Thank God there are many beautiful Muslims around the world, and they're wonderful people just like anybody else. It's the ones who are at the core of creating this propaganda and trying to destroy the West with the jihadist views. They're the problem that I'm talking about.
Yeah, because I also read in that book Hostage by Elie Sharabi, mentioned it once again, that the terrorists told them that there is no Israel. We don't want anything that we call Israel, but they don't stop there. They also told them that there is no France, there is no UK. Everything is Islamist caliphate. Everything is supposed to be ours. There is no Germany. There is no Norway. Everything will be ours. It's just a matter of time. So these are dangerous ideologies that we have to take seriously. And as you said, I also want to underline that this doesn't mean that this goes for every Muslim, but this goes for Islamists, extreme Islamists who have this kind of ideology, and we need to take it seriously. But we have to talk about also the going forward about this, the peace plan, the Abraham Accords, and who will actually govern in Gaza itself. Will it be, I've seen the suggestions that it should be Arabic or Muslim countries going together, creating some kind of security force. And who will disarm Hamas? So what do you think about the future there in Gaza itself going forward?
I think the Abraham Accords, contrary to most of my peers who work in Israeli diplomacy and are Zionist, okay? So these are people that we agree on almost everything. But in this matter, we're on two different paradigms on this issue. I do not believe in their Abraham Accords. I never have. I don't trust, again, I do not trust the pan-Arab world, because they do not recognize the Jewish people and their right to the land. There are some Arab countries who do, and they're not the ones who are spearheading the Abraham Accords, because the minute you bring in Saudi Arabia, and the minute you bring in Qatar, and the minute you bring in Turkey, then you're bringing in bad actors that cannot be fully trusted, in my personal opinion, in my humble opinion. Now, there are others that will completely contradict what I'm saying, and they are representing, I would say, the conservative movement in Israel and or Zionist views. But I'm sorry, history has shown me that I cannot trust them. Qatar is the #1 funder of terrorism in the world, both physical terrorists and propaganda terrorism. Okay, they fund all the high Ivy League universities worldwide. They fund a bunch of entrepreneurial business initiatives worldwide. In other words, they have their fingers in everything, so they can control basically any world agenda of any kind in the world, globally. So they are a globalist, jihadist entity that are using all of their wealth to do that and to perpetuate that. And so just the fact that they're the main player in trying to negotiate this peace plan in Gaza is telling me that we're naive to believe that this is going to work. And I'm only assuming that the Prime Minister of Israel and our leadership are not dumb enough to believe that this is reality, but that we're going along with it and saying, fine, if this is what America thinks is gonna bring a magic wand of peace in the Middle East, we'll play the game, but we're not stupid, and we're not gonna sleep, so to speak, on the watch. We're gonna do what we can to defend ourselves and mitigate any threat to us. But I don't think anybody is naive enough to truly believe that this is going to bring about an actual disarming of Hamas and or any real peacekeeping force in Gaza. That's unrealistic. It's a joke. It's what they tried in Lebanon with the United Nations, and guess what happened? You know, we forget history. We are in the West. We forget history. We're very quick to it's the fast food generation. You know, it's the let's make a deal now. It's give it to me now. You guys are in a completely different you're in a completely different sphere. You're not in the same reality that we're in here. And the Arabs know this, and they take advantage of the West and Western view to push their long-term goal, which you pointed out very beautifully, is it is all ours. Like the terrorists were telling Sharabi, it is all ours. All of Europe, all of Israel, all of America, everything's going to become Islam. Everything's going to become this pan-Arabic caliphate. And it's just different, how do you say, there's different, like if it's Al-Qaeda or if it's ISIS or if it's Hamas or if it's Iran, they're all coming at it from different angles. And each one wants, of course, to be the one to say, I ushered in the new caliphate. But at the end of the day, they all have the same unified agenda, which is make Islam supreme globally. And they're, so they're all fighting to be the one that ushered it in, but they're also going to help each other to do it, and from different angles. And that's what we're up against. So no, I do not trust these people. Not for a minute.
Yeah, we're gonna round it up. Do you have some closing comments, Leif, before we continue in Norwegian the rest of our podcast?
No, I think Doron has said it all. You know,
Yeah,
we've covered a lot of ground here, so it's been really interesting to listen to you. Thank you so much.
definitely, so interesting. Thank you so much, Doron, for coming here to our podcast and enlightening us with your thoughts and your information and all that you know. And please, everybody who's listening and watching this, go to his website, doronkeidar.com, to see his podcast as well, and his stuff on there on the website. So thank you. We're probably going to invite you several times to run to this podcast. Yeah. And I wish you a Shabbat Shalom and a good weekend.
And stay
Henrik,
safe.
Henrik, Leif, thank you guys. You've been awesome. Thank you, brothers.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Ok, da fortsetter vi sendingen her på norsk. Det var altså Doron Keidar fra IDF, Sergeant Major der. Så det ble en ekstra lang sending i dag, for det var mye å snakke om der, det var mye informasjon. Men veldig interessant å høre fra en som faktisk har vært på Gaza nå de siste 2 månedene, og nettopp kommet ut, og det er sjelden man får den typen informasjon rett fra from the horse's mouth, som man sier på engelsk.
Ja. Han er jo jeg tenker jo alltid på liksom, han lever jo i en virkelighet der som vi ikke kan sette oss inn i. Altså, og man fortalte at han ville ikke fortelle så mye om akkurat hva han holdt på med, men han sa jo at han var i en mobil stridende enhet som reiser rundt omkring i Gaza. Det vil si at det er fare rundt hvert hjørne, eller i hvert fall man må anta det. Og han sa heller ikke hvor mange dager det hadde vært, men han sa han har blitt kalt ut 4 ganger de siste 2 årene. Så det er ganske heftig. Vi i Norge vet ikke hvor heldige vi er, som ikke trenger å legge ned alt vi gjør og reise av gårde og sette oss selv i fare, som han også var inne på, altså i store økonomiske konsekvenser for hele familien og trygghet og alt mulig. Så det er ja, det er liksom vanskelig. Vi kan ikke sette oss inn i hvordan det er for ham. Det kan vi bare ikke. Så det er bra at han formidler hvordan hans virkelighet er. Så man får litt mer innsikt i det også.
Virkelig, vi har noen flere temaer vi må gå gjennom her. I Norge, tilbake hit i vår boble her, så er det sånn at det jødiske miljøet både i Oslo og Trondheim nå bryter med ARS, altså Antirasistisk Senter. Og dette har jo med Novemberpogromene å gjøre i hvert fall. Kan du opplyse oss litt, Leif, hva er det som har skjedd her med denne situasjonen?
Ja, det som skjedde var vel at i går eller i forgårs så sendte både styreledere og rabbinere for det mosaiske trossamfunnet og det jødiske samfunnet i Trondheim til et brev til statsministerens kontor og til ordføreren i Oslo, da de fikk høre at både Lindboe og Støre skulle være appellanter på Antirasistisk Senters markering av det de kaller krystallnatten, som mer korrekt egentlig kalles Novemberpogromene. Og den markeringen til ARS, den har foregått i mange år, men i de siste årene så har det vært umulig for noe organisert jødisk liv å delta i det. Dette går tilbake til en tid hvor de brukte anledning til å markere anti-israelske synspunkter og til politisk aktivisme. Det var liksom, de ville jo først forby israelske flagg, og så ble det til at de ikke skulle ha noen flagg. Vi får se hvordan det blir denne gangen. Men i mellomtiden så har også ARS utgitt en såkalt rapport som er rett og slett anti-israelsk, hvor de mer enn antyder at Israel ikke burde eksistere. Og de har, for å si det pent, vist lite solidaritet med hverken israeler eller jøder etter 7. oktober. Det har vært veldig sånn ensidig. Så bruddet er egentlig ikke så nytt. Jeg er litt overrasket over at det presenteres sånn, men jeg tror det kommer av i brevet som DMT og DJST sendte, så ga de inntrykk av det. Men hvis media og for så vidt de andre hadde undersøkt nærmere, så har de sagt at det har vært et de facto brudd i ganske lang tid. Nå er dette blitt fremstilt veldig rart i media, synes jeg. Det er jo særlig Dagen har gjort noen ting hvor de snakker om at det er brudd nylig, og Vårt Land hadde en veldig merkelig fremstilling av ting, så jeg tror det er nødvendig at og NRK var helt håpløst. Var ikke til å forstå hva de snakket om i det hele tatt der. Så jeg vil foreslå at folk setter seg litt mer inn i det. Jeg skal prøve å skrive om det i bmet.no og også legge frem hele brevet, så alle kan lese det faktiske brevet som ble skrevet. Men det ironiske her er jo, og så vil jeg si at i tillegg til at DMT og DJST sendte det, så sendte jo også da Bnei Brit i Norge, Kos og Kaos, og det jødiske fellesskapet i Norge, som andre organisasjoner, tilslutningsbrev til både statsminister og ordfører om at de var helt enige i det som kom fra dette brevet. Så dette er jo den store bredden i det jødiske miljøet som reagerer veldig på den beslutningen fra statsminister og ordfører. Og i mellomtiden så har Støre da bekreftet at han kommer til å stille på dette arrangementet, og at han ikke kommer til DMT. Så han har tatt et valg. Han har tatt et valg at han foretrekker heller de antisemittiske kreftene i Antirasistisk Senter, som påberoper seg å snakke på vegne av alle jødene i Norge, da det er helt åpenbart ikke gjør det, over den største jødiske institusjonen i Norge. Og det håper jeg han får svare for.
Hva tenker du om det?
Nei, jeg må jo legge godviljen til og tro at Antirasistisk Senter presenterte dette som det var noe som var et arrangement med det jødiske miljøet, og at de løy, men så er det vanskelig for Støre å trekke seg ut av det. Altså rett og slett hans kontor burde undersøkt litt nærmere om hva det var, og kanskje dobbeltsjekket med DMT. Han har det vanskelig for han å snakke seg ut av, men signaleffekten er jo veldig, veldig dårlig. Så vi ser hva han sier da, hvis han benytter anledningen til å påpeke det ironiske i at det arrangeres markering for Novemberpogromene, og på de markeringene så det faktisk ikke trygt for jøder å være, med mindre de liksom konverterer til dette anti-israelske synspunktet som disse har. Så det...
Her listen over de som skal arrangere dette her. Det liksom, det LO, det Antirasistisk Senter, Norsk Folkehjelp, Rødt Oslo, Aksjonsgruppa for Palestina, Palestinakomiteen, altså i Norge og Oslo. Altså det sånn, disse her skal nå stå for Novemberpogromene, markeringen. Ja. Men det minner jo mest om en sånn hijack, på en måte.
Ja, det ikke noe å minne på engang. Det de kupper det. Så prøver de jo da å ta det vekk fra det jødiske miljøet og fremmedgjøre jødene fra dette egne. Og de ser ikke ironien i det hele tatt. De ser ikke at dette her egentlig eller noen gjør det, men mange av de som deltar skjønner ikke at dette her at å stenge jøder ute fra en markering om overgrep mot jøder, det blir helt umusikalsk. De ser ikke det umusikalske i det. Og reaksjonen fra ARS når de har blitt konfrontert med det, sier nei, vi jo mot antisemittisme. Det bare jødene som ikke... Det bare jødene det noe gærent med, som ikke forstår at vi på deres side.
Jeg har også hørt sånne type kommentarer som at nei, nå det viktig at krystallnatten handler om Gaza. Det det krystallnatten må handle om nå. Det viktigere. Ja.
Det jo det som går i å kuppe det, ikke sant? De stjeler premissene, og så sier de at jødene har misforstått det de selv var offer for. Og jeg mener at vi må stritte imot. Altså, ja, som sagt, jeg tillater meg å publisere dette brevet hvis folk går til bmet.no, så kan de få lese det. For det litt sånn feil gjengitt også i media, og som vanlig så lenker de ikke til selve brevet, så det gjelder for folk å sette seg litt inn i dette her. Men i mellomtiden så må jo da det jødiske samfunnet markerer da Novemberpogromene bak lukkede dører og med streng sikkerhet. Det ikke lurt for folk som deg og meg å gå i sentrum når Novemberpogromene eller skal markeres der i regi av Antirasistisk Senter. Jeg synes det helt utrolig at Antirasistisk Senter, som har så liten tillit blant jødiske nordmenn, ikke synes det problematisk i det hele tatt. Og de får jo penger de får jo offentlig støtte for å drive med dette her. Og jeg vil jo si at hvis du antirasist, hvis du påbruker deg for antirasistisk og får ikke tillit fra en av de mest sårbare minoritetene som du får penger til å støtte, så har de jo egentlig mistet all troverdighet. Og du bør legges ned. Altså da forsømmer de samfunnsoppgaven sin så fundamentalt at ingen burde jo stole på dem i det hele tatt. Så jeg har vanskelig for å jeg har veldig mye forakt for det der, altså. Og LO burde vite bedre, de også.
Absurditeten jo komplett, ikke sant? Når man får en sånn markering av krystallnatten / Novemberpogromene da. Så lang tid etter, altså hvor mange år etter blir det? Det 83 år etter eller noe sånt? Og da når du skal markere det, så jøder den dag i dag i 2025 redde for å møte opp i gaten om å feire, eller ikke feire, men markere dette på hemmelig adresse bak masse sikkerhet. Når man liksom skulle være et annet sted nå i historien på en måte, skulle jo tro at vi var en annen plass hvor jøder ble hegnet om eller i hvert fall føle seg så sikre og trygge i samfunnet nå i dag at man kan faktisk gå ut og markere at vi kommet lenger, heldigvis i dag i 2025, enn vi var under Novemberpogromene i 1938, var vel det. Og mens i stedet så jo antisemittismen og absurditeten komplett når det fortsatt samme type stemning som gjør at jøder må gjemme seg og kan ikke engang markere denne dagen utendørs. Og samtidig så blir den kapret av disse organisasjonene som skal få den til å handle om Gaza i stedet. Så det jo en helt, altså sirkelen jo sluttet. Den jo helt komplett, den der absurditeten der.
Ja. Nå har jo ARS sagt at de ikke har tenkt å snakke om Palestina i den greia. Vi får se om det holder i de appellene som kommer. Men det som stadig vekk går igjen da, også i det brevet, at å holde stadig sånn festtaler hvor man snakker om at man skal motarbeide antisemittisme, men når det kommer til faktisk handling som koster noen ting, så blir det noe litt annet. Så ARS sier nei, vi er mot antisemittisme. Støre sier ja, jeg er mot antisemittisme. Men dette jeg tror de trenger jeg har ingen tillit til at ARS bryr seg om antirasisme i det hele tatt lenger. De er ikke en antirasistisk organisasjon, de er et eller annet. De er en radikal politisk bevegelse som bruker ord som skulle tilsi at det er antirasistisk, men det er det ikke. Men Støre burde vite, han burde gå en skikkelig runde med seg selv over at han handler på den måten, at han nå får stadig flere signaler fra den jødiske minoriteten, at han svikter i det han lover han skal gjøre. Han burde begynne å ta det alvorlig i stedet for å bare lire av seg noen klisjeer om at han egentlig er uskyldig.
Og det er jo egentlig ikke noe unnskyldning det der at man kanskje liksom har sagt ja for lenge siden, og når man følger opp, fordi hvis han hadde fått informasjon om at et event han skulle på var for eksempel rasistisk mot mørkhudede, eller at de brukte N-ord eller noe sånt, så hadde han snudd på sekundene og sagt at jeg avlyser, jeg kommer ikke dit allikevel. Så det er ikke noe sånn at han har vansker for å kansellere sin opptreden, eller å avlyse, eller å gjøre endring i planene. Så vi kan godt ta det som en bekreftelse på at han støtter opp under dette her. Det er ikke noe unnskyldning, han vet jo om dette her nå. Han har fått så tydelig beskjed.
Men hvis du ser hvem som er arrangører der, det er LO i Oslo og Norsk Folkehjelp. Og han har ikke råd til å få dem mot seg. Det er en ting å gjøre SV sinte. Det er ikke hans base, men LO er en del av hans base. Og LO har markert seg som veldig anti-Israel. Så det uansett hva han mener, så har han ikke han greier ikke å stå imot det presset der. Men han burde jo kunne gjøre det. Han burde jo kunne gjøre det, men han har en sånn realpolitisk linje om at han ikke kan gjøre folk i LO sure. Og da hiver han alle andre under bussen. Det er bare realiteten.
Han mangler ryggrad, det. Så det er helt sprøtt. Men vi har flere ting å ta opp også. Vi skal nevne dette her med at du har jo et nyhetsbrev, men du har jo nå laget det om til en nettside også, ikke sant, som heter bmet.no, der folk kan gå inn og lese og få oppdateringer, og det synes jeg er en veldig god avgjørelse å gjøre det. Kan du fortelle litt om hva folk kan finne der inne?
Ja, foreløpig er det ikke så innmari mye. Jeg startet den opp i går eller noe sånt nå, så vi er veldig tidlig i løpet, men alle nyhetsbrevene kommer etter hvert til å publiseres der også fremover. Og så tar jeg inn artikler som folk har skrevet, som enten med deres tillatelse jeg publiserer her, eller som de har fått refusert av andre medier. Og så kommer det til å være en del sånne ressurser. Så en ting jeg har lagt inn allerede da, det er jo en kalender, som viser både har både en hebraisk kalender, som man kan se når man skal tenne lys og sånn, men også har viktige historiske begivenheter gjennom tidene. Og også da begivenheter som kan være verdt å være med på her. Og da går det an å abonnere, det er en Google-kalender, så det går det an å abonnere på i egne Google-kalendere. Og så kommer jeg til å legge ut mer ressurser, så det er verdt å følge med på der jeg går innom av og til. Og så er det også en BM-et Facebook-side som republiserer disse tingene. Det er en BM-et i Norge X-konto, og det kommer til å bli mer etter hvert også. Så
kommer det til å være på den kalenderen, for eksempel når det skjer sånne ting som panelsamtaler eller kos og kaos-ting, og så kommer du til å legge inn alt som er på en måte relevant til jødisk liv og Israel og type ting i Norge der?
Ja, det kommer jeg til å gjøre. Jeg er ikke helt ajour når jeg har begynt å legge det inn, men det kommer til å være begrenset til offentlige arrangementer da. Og jeg er på en plattform som at jeg gjør etter hvert kan også få at jeg også kan ha medlemmer, sånn at folk kan komme inn bak en slags mur da. Og jeg har ikke helt funnet ut hvordan det skal funke. Det mulig det blir på litt sånn flere nivåer. Men ja, det helt i startgropen, men jeg tror det skal bli bra. Og jeg kommer til grunnen til at jeg tok opp det nå, var fordi at jeg forplikter meg selv til å legge ut materiale der.
Det veldig bra.
Når man lover noe offentlig, så det mer sannsynlig at man gjør det.
Det akkurat det. Det veldig bra. En annen ting som har skjedd den siste tiden jo at BBC blitt avslørt om at de lyver om Israel og sprer Hamas propaganda. Jeg har lyst til å spille av en video her som fra The Telegraph for alle sammen, som vi kan se på nå sammen, som den bare 2 minutter lang, men jeg synes den veldig interessant, så nå skal jeg sette på denne her. Skal vi se der, altså...
Accuse someone of a crime when you had no independent witnesses to it? Well, you almost certainly wouldn't, especially if you had prior knowledge of someone else being to blame. But that's exactly what the BBC has been accused of doing to Israel in this dossier. And the author of this dossier? Well, it's a former member of the broadcaster's own Editorial Standards Committee. This is the latest set of troubling allegations to hit the BBC as part of a Telegraph investigation into claims the broadcaster's coverage has systemic problems over impartiality. So let's get into it. In April and June 2024, the BBC published 2 stories about the discovery of mass graves at Al-Nasser and Al-Shifa hospitals in Gaza. According to the internal BBC dossier, the articles strongly implied that Israeli forces had buried bodies at both sites prior to withdrawing from the area. The articles also mentioned alleged evidence of war crimes, including bodies found with their hands tied and gunshot wounds to their heads. But the BBC's own Editorial Standards Committee was told that this narrative was wrong. The memo says that the most likely explanation is that the mass graves were dug by Palestinians themselves and the people buried there had died or been killed prior to the arrival of the Israeli ground forces. So, the BBC made a mistake. Well, perhaps. But the committee argues that the broadcaster knew that Palestinians were burying their dead at these sites before the Israeli raids. Several months earlier, the BBC itself reported on Palestinians digging mass graves, and geolocation clearly places the 2 burial sites in roughly the same area. Now, whatever your personal views may be on the actions of Israel in Gaza, implying a country committed war crimes when there is evidence to the contrary has serious ramifications, not least because it could erode the credibility of genuine war crime claims at a later date. How can we expect anyone to develop an informed or nuanced opinion when the BBC is only presenting them with some of the facts? That is perhaps the most damning takeaway of all.
Ja, så dette her har jo da skjedd nå siste tiden med avsløringer da om BBC og hva de driver med. Har du lest litt om dette her, Leif? Har du satt deg inn i dette her?
Nei, jeg har ikke fått tid til å sette meg inn i det, og det håper jeg at jeg skal gjøre, men BBC har jo tidligere også, det har blitt dokumentert, og det har blitt påpekt før at BBC har hatt en tendensiøs dekning av litt av hvert. Altså samtidig med dette så kom det også opp at de hadde redigert en tale av Trump, sånn at den fremstod på en helt annen måte enn det var levert. Og dette var jo selvfølgelig den arabiske tjenesten til BBC. Men for å ta et skritt tilbake da, så jo dette med mediedekning det vanskelig å gjøre det. Men nettopp derfor det viktig at redaktører og journalister strekker seg ekstra for å passe på at det blir så presist som det mulig å gjøre, og jeg tror det 2 hovedgrunner til at dekningene har vært tendensiøs. Eller 3 egentlig. Det første jo en sånn ren tendens til tabloidisme, at man får flere klikk hvis man legger opp sensasjonelle ting, om for eksempel ordet massegrav, eller henrettelser, ikke sant? Det får automatisk klikk. Så det alltid veldig fristende for desken å bare sende det ut. Det andre at det veldig stort sosialt press, både i Storbritannia og Norge og andre steder, til å vinkle ting på en bestemt måte. Så selv om de ikke liksom går inn med en agenda om å være anti-israelsk, så får de mye bråk hvis de ikke er det, og de får mye ros hvis de er det. Så man opplærer seg selv til å gjøre det. Og det tredje er jo dette kontroversen om journalisters tilgang til krigssoner i Gaza og for så vidt andre steder. Hvor journalister har jo nylig vært på møte hos regjeringen og bedt regjeringen om å legge press på Israel om å liksom slippe til journalister i Gaza. Og det er jo noe som israelske journalister også har klagd over, at de ikke får tilgang, de kan ikke drive uavhengig rapportering derfra. Men det som en del presse har gjort i stedet, og det har jo NRK innrømmet også, er at de rapporterer det som blir meldt til dem av kilder i Gaza, som om det er sant. Enda de vet utmerket godt at det er ingen som kan si noen ting i Gaza, eller sånn som det var, i hvert fall uten at Hamas godtok det. Men de tar ikke det forbeholdet da, om at kildene de har er kanskje upålitelige. De rapporterer den informasjonen de har, og ser bort fra at den kan være upålitelig. Og resultatet er jo at det blir en veldig skjev fremstilling, også veldig skjevt inntrykk av hva som faktisk har skjedd. Og så viser det seg da, for eksempel det som var snakk om her, disse massegravene, at det var feil. Men de dementerer ikke like ivrig som de først rapporterer, om de dementerer i det hele tatt. Sånn at man har alltid en sånn, de som faktisk vil ha nøyaktige og gode nyheter, de henger jo alltid etter, ikke sant? For at vi kan ikke kommentere på et rykte, selv om det rapporteres som en nyhet, og innen det har vist seg at det er et rykte, eller om det viser seg å være berettiget, så er det ingen som følger med lenger når det blir rapportert. Og som sagt, hverken BBC eller norske medier har som vane å korrigere saker som viser seg å være feil. Og når det gjaldt, som for eksempel nå husker jeg ikke navnet på det sykehuset hvor de påstod at 500 mennesker var drept, ikke sant, så viser av en israelsk rakett, så viser at det var en rakett fra palestinsk islamsk jihad som hadde landet på en parkeringsplass, og veldig få var drept. Så dementerte de på en måte sånn at det var litt usikkert hva som hadde skjedd, så de hadde først presentert noe feil, som om det var fakta, og da det kom til syne at det som de presenterte var fakta, var uriktig, så sa de at alt var usikkert, og lot dermed la det være en åpen mulighet for at det de først rapporterte var riktig. Og dette er jo bare veldig slurvete journalistisk håndverk. Det er sånt man ville strøket på i alle andre steder, men av en eller annen grunn så godtas det her. Og Israel er ikke det eneste. Vi ser jo nå det samme også i dekningen og styret og støyen om alt som skjer i USA, hvor det er bare én riktig fremstilling. Og som han i The Telegraph var inne på, det som er problemet er jo egentlig ikke hva som skjer med omdømmet til partene der. Det er at redaktørstyrt presse mister troverdighet generelt. Og jeg merker jo det også, for når jeg ser på nyheter på NRK, så tenker jeg vet jo, kan jo være at 80% er riktig og 20% er feil, men jeg kan ikke finne ut hva som er riktig og hva som er feil, uten å undersøke nærmere.
Jeg tror det er motsatt, det. Jeg tror det er 20% riktig og 80% feil.
Men det er i hvert fall, om du eller jeg har rett, så er det i hvert fall, det er for dårlig troverdighet, ikke sant? Altså, vi skal kunne stole på redaktørstyrt presse, og de ansvarliggjøres ikke nok. Altså, de har en tendens til å avvise kritikk når de får det, eller bortforklare det. Pressens faglige utvalg konsentrerer seg bare om bare brudd på etikk og ikke dårlig håndverk. Og K-rådet skal gjøre en del, men der er det veldig, veldig høy terskel for at det skal komme noe kritikk ut av det. Så vi har egentlig ikke en vaktbikkje for det som skulle være vaktbikkjene i Norge, og det er et systemisk problem.
Men heldigvis så har vi nå den 5. statsmakt, og vaktbikkjene sitter her i dette studio. Og hvis du vil støtte disse vaktbikkjene, så kan du støtte arbeidet her med VIPS nummer 82 32 78. Det er veldig viktig arbeid med å holde pressa i ørene. For pressen er jo den 4. statsmakt, den burde jo bidra til demokratiet, men når de ikke gjør det, så må noen andre gjøre det. Så støtt gjerne arbeidet her sånn med det. Så har vi en kommentar her fra Jon Aslak. Fintland, som sier at i forhold til BBC veldig mye tyder på at NRK så godt de kan forsøker på minst mulig søkelys på BBC om dette, fordi NRK har jo også mye svin på skogen, så inntil videre er strategien i NRK snakke om andre saker, men om denne meganyheten gjør de akkurat det de må jo ikke bli tatt med buksa nede, men ikke en millimeter mer. Sånn at det tror jeg du har rett i, Jonas Lak. Og så vil jeg også legge til en tanke jeg har selv, er at journalister nå for tiden har begynt å skrive mye mer om verden slik de ønsker at den skal være, i stedet for å skrive om verden slik den er. Sånn at sannhet blir offret for idealisme, og prøve å skrive sånn som de gjerne ønsket at den skulle se ut, ikke sant? Sånn at hvis du har folk som er helt radikaliserte med palestinaskjær som sitter i redaksjonen og gjerne vil at virkelighetsforståelsen sin skal være ekte, at Israel er den største onde på jord, så er man kanskje litt mer, tenderer kanskje litt mer til å skru litt på virkeligheten, sånn at den passer til det bildet du ønsker å ha av virkeligheten. Så jeg tror det kanskje kan være mange sånne typer mekanismer. Og hvis hele redaksjonen er sånn, så kanskje man er litt sånn enig alle sammen da, og da mister man fokus på sannhet, som jo burde være styrken med når man sier lytt til redaktørstyrte medier, som pleier å være gullstandarden, men etter hvert så har jeg begynt å si ikke lytt til redaktørstyrte medier, eller i hvert fall skaff deg et balansert bilde, men også lytte til ting som ikke er redaktørstyrt, og prøve å danne deg et helhetlig bilde, og i hvert fall ikke bare norske redaktørstyrte medier. Men
nå skal vi være forsiktige med å ikke generalisere.
Ja,
også. Det er jo mange samvittighetsfulle og flinke journalister og redaktører i Norge. Det som plager meg er jo at de blir jo jeg vil jo tro at de også blir litt frustrert og skuffet over at de som prøver å gjøre en samvittighetsfull god jobb blir helt overkjørt av de som gjør en slurvete, tendensiøs jobb. Så jeg vil være jeg vil være veldig forsiktig med å karakterisere hele NRK eller hele VG eller hele alt sammen på en bestemt måte, men heller gå på de konkrete feilene de gjør, og så påpeke dem. For det er det de lærer av. De lærer ingenting av at vi kjefter på dem. Det er i hvert fall helt sikkert. Så det men liksom, hvis folk gjør en oppgave og sa på en sak og dokumentere godt, vise hva som er feil med den saken, hvorfor det er slurvete håndverk, og det er slurvete håndverk som er best å ta det på, og melder det på en ordentlig og saklig måte med innestemme, uten å kjefte, uten å beskylde dem for alle mulige forferdelige ting, det har en større effekt enn at vi sier at nei, de er alle onde, slemme eller onde, eller sånn, slemme eller dumme. De lærer av konstruktiv, spesifikk feedback, som alle vi andre gjør.
Det de også kanskje lærer er seertallene. Hvis folk slutter å se på det, så ser de at oi, kanskje vi gjør noe feil med dekningen vår.
Ja, altså det er jo dette med alternative medier er jo ytterst variabel kvalitet. Det er unntatt vi da, vi er jo selvfølgelig fantastiske, du og jeg, men nei, det er jo, ikke sant, altså vi blir ikke betalt for vi er amatører, sånn. Vi gjør så godt vi kan da, men vi har ikke de ressursene som redaktørstyrte medier har. Og jeg mener jo, og vi står jo friere, så det er jo alternative medier inkluderer en del litt sånn ville greier også. Så jeg er liksom opptatt at vi som driver med podcasting og som skriver andre ting, at vi på en måte holder oss til en høyere standard, eller ikke er hykkeligere da, at vi holder oss til en like høy standard som det vi skulle ønske at redaktørstyrte media gjorde, og det er en oppfordring til alle dere andre også. For en annen ting jeg reagerer på er jo liksom, jeg synes jo at alt for mye av debattprogrammene på NRK og TV 2 har fått et sånn underholdningstilsnitt, hvor det gjelder å være flinke med kjappe replikker og være kul og kjefte og sånn. Og dermed så blir jo da det saklige innholdet blir jo lavere. For det er en del ting som faktisk er litt vanskelig å forklare. Altså, men på 20 sekunder så er det begrenset hvor mye du kan gjøre rede for, uansett hvor flink du er.
Vi må runde av snart, men jeg tenkte vi kan bare ta en siste sak før vi sier god helg, og det er dette her med Nasjonalmuseet og den israelske kunstneren. Hva er det som har skjedd der, Leif?
Ja, det har jo vært en kampanje for å sette ned, og der har jeg en sak, en veldig god sak på bmet.no, så anbefaler alle å gå og lese den. Men det er jo et kunstverk som er laget av en israelsk kunstner som døde i 2007, Noah Eshkol heter hun, som dreide seg om til minne, det kalles sørgeteppe, også i parentes, til minne over offrene til massakren i Umalot på 70-tallet, 1974 var det vel. Og det var en massakre som ble utført av en av disse palestinske frigjøringsbevegelsene, den som for øvrig Lars Gule sluttet seg til etterpå. Og hvor en rekke skolebarn og andre ble myrdet. Og dette synes noen i det kunstmiljøet at det var propaganda for Israel og okkupasjon og sånn, og ville ta det ned. Og dette med å liksom tilskrive kunst politisk innhold som de ikke har, for derved å på en måte slette det fra offentligheten. Dette går jo tilbake til sånn formalist, det som innskrenker ut hvor mye folk kan utfolde seg på det grunnlaget der. Og så i tillegg så er det jo helt absurd, altså hvis du leser den saken på bmet.no, hvor folk forstår bakgrunnen for og historien til dette kunstverket, så er det jo helt tydelig at det er absolutt ingenting med den type politikk å gjøre. Så det at de som går inn for å ta det ned, det er de prøver rett og slett å kneble og slette ut israelsk kunstuttrykk, selv ting som er forholdsvis gamle. Så det er helt foraktelig, men heldigvis er det andre som har tatt til orde for dette her også, blant annet i Aftenposten.
Så der er oppfordringen altså å gå inn på den nye nettsiden til Leif, bmet.no, bemet.no, så kan du gå inn og lese der. Og der kan du vel også bli medlem av nyhetsbrevet også, få det tilsendt, og følge med på kalenderen for hva som skjer fremover. Jeg har lyst til å også nevne et Kos og Kaos-event som skal være, hvilken dato er det igjen, Leif, denne her samtalen om menneskerettigheter som skal være...
Den er veldig viktig, for den er også, nå skal jeg prøve å slå det opp her, den er mellom aktivister i Norge og noen israelere, og dette dreier seg om disse fremmede... Dette dreier seg om humanitære organisasjoner og hva som har skjedd med dem. Og Haviv Retigor, som vi liker, dette er 24.11., det arrangementet her. Haviv Retigor, han har også en podcast veldig nylig om dette emnet, hvor han intervjuet blant annet Daniel Haas, som også kommer til Oslo. Så dette tror jeg er et ganske viktig arrangement, og jeg håper at flest mulig kommer på det.
Så det er altså mandag 24. november klokka 6 på Litteraturhuset. Så heter det da på engelsk Human Rights Between Effectiveness and Counterproductivity. A frank, solutions-oriented conversation about the future of human rights advocacy, credibility, impartiality, and how to rebuild public trust without losing moral clarity. Hvordan skal man si det på norsk? Altså en åpen og ærlig, resultatorientert, løsningsorientert samtale om fremtiden, om menneskerettighetsarbeid. Aktivisme, kredibilitet og uavhengighet, eller nøytralitet kanskje, og hvordan man skal gjenbygge offentlig tillit uten å miste moralsk tydelighet. Så det blir veldig interessant, og interessante gjester, mye tung bakgrunn på scenen der sånn. Så meld dere på det, gå til kosokaos.org for å melde dere på det. Jeg kan skrive den linken her også, sånn at dere har det.
Og støtt dem gjerne økonomisk også, fordi disse arrangementene de får til er faktisk ganske imponerende. Det er liksom folk helt i verdensklasse som de får til Norge, og det er ikke alltid billig. Så
imot.
Ja, liksom gi dem oppmerksomhet, møt opp, meld dere på arrangementene, støtt dem økonomisk med det dere kan.
Kosokaos.org der, sånn 24. november. Men jeg tenker at nå har vi hatt en ganske lang sending i dag. Det var jo veldig interessant. Men tusen takk for følget alle sammen, og alle som har sett på. Tusen takk til deg, Leif. Og
I like måte.
ønsker deg en riktig god helg også, og Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Ja, jeg tenker at vi runder av det. Tusen takk alle sammen. Ha en riktig god helg. Ha det, ha det.